you need to have a robust program where you have everything from your welcome sequence to cross sells, upsells, continual engagement emails on top of, post purchases and sales, seasonal sales, all of that. Like you really need to be hitting all your bases or else you're basically leaving money on the table. Welcome to the e-commerce Mavericks. I have Megan Bortner from Labyrinth Digital here with us. Megan has over a decade of experience in e-commerce and consulting and helping brands grow online. If it has happened, she has seen it. Megan specializes in data and email marketing. Email marketing, yes, still a popular and very effective channel for driving growth. And Megan's going to share with us some insights and strategies to help us do that. So welcome, Megan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be on the podcast.
You too. We're early days, so I'm having to pay people to come on. So I appreciate you taking some time to come and chat with me on our podcast. But it's been a lot of fun, and we've had some really valuable people, and I'm super excited to dive in with you. Megan, email is really, I think, your bread and butter, something that you know really well. You told me a stat that's pretty wild, that email can generate up to 35% of a brand's revenue, which is a much greater chunk than I thought. Given that you've audited thousands of brands' email strategies and accounts, what are the key factors that separate high-performing email campaigns and programs from so-so ones that are doing maybe 5% of their brand's revenue?
Yeah, so I love talking about email. I think just for brands that are in that scaling space and have a limited amount of budget, email's so valuable just for one reason that there's just no ad spend behind it. So it's really easy to have a really good return from the channel. Another reason we see huge value behind email is that email address can be a unique identifier across your digital platform. So if you have somebody's email information, you can load it to your social channels, to your Google channels, and just target it that way. In terms of like where we see email, I'd say for a healthy e-commerce program, email revenue tends to fall between like 20 all the way up to 35% of a brand's revenue. I'd say there's a few components of what makes a really effective email marketing program. The first is just building out both your campaigns, which would be like your sales, your new product announcements, and having a regular cadence for that. And the second part, which is where a good, I'd say more than half of your revenue comes from, is doing a really good job of building out your life cycle communications or flows, as you will. So think about your welcome communication when someone joins, your browse abandonment, abandon cart, and then once they have purchased, thinking through what are those things you can do to get them to buy again, go deeper into the brand depending what you have, share your brand with like a refer a friend or a loyalty program. Just building that entire email lifecycle out from when someone first started all the way until they're like showing they're not engaged, and doing a really good job of building those communications and being able to go is like personalized and segmented as possible. Those are like some of the keys to doing a really good job with your program.
So it sounds like you need to have a robust program where you have everything from your welcome sequence to cross sells, upsells, continual engagement emails on top of, post purchases and sales, seasonal sales, all of that. Like you really need to be hitting all your bases or else you're basically leaving money on the table.
No, for sure. I think it's just really important. I think both building out that like campaign strategy as well as the life cycle strategy. And I'd say when we audit and look at brands, a lot of people have that campaign strategy in place, but they've barely brushed the surface of how well they've built out communications for that customer life cycle, that they may have like one welcome touch in place and it's for everybody, whether they've a first time subscriber to the site, whether they've purchased and they join your list later. There's a lot of opportunities to segment out so the messaging meets the email subscriber where they are with their journey with the brand. And I'd say a lot of brands don't go further enough in building out relevant lifecycle communications.
Interesting. So you're, it's as terrible as this sounds, but essentially making sure that you're touching each person in a very personalized way that brings them into the brand, shows that you care about them, but then too also maximizes their average order value and their spend with your brand.
For sure.
Gotcha. And so along those lines, like how do I make my emails more personal? Where are some life cycle gaps or areas where I could probably be plugging holes that you see a lot or that you see often?
I think first is maybe thinking through what's the ideal journey you have with somebody's brand and mapping it out. And then thinking through, I guess, what is all the data that you have on somebody that you can incorporate it into? So, I guess, for example, like a really obvious one is some of that behavioral web data. So once you have somebody's email address, you could see what they browsed on your website. So there's opportunity to send them communications based on what they browsed. So if they bought some, or if they're browsing something that is really expensive or has a lot more information, you could have a different communication strategy for someone that had browsed that versus somebody that had browsed maybe a lower ticket item or never made it to a product page. You may have different flows based on how far they've gone with your brand. So browse data is a really important one. Another common data point you can pull in is just purchase information if you have that. So if they purchase something, what would be, is it something that you want to purchase again? And that might be knowing what the right cadence is of when the average person would reorder, or if it's something that you'd only just purchase once, but you have a deeper catalog, knowing what's the most likely thing to push next based on what they purchase. So that would be another really common data point. And then there's other ways to pull in that are what the customer gives you. So potentially they give you like their name or they give you their location data. So that could be potentially you're selling, we'll say windshield wipers or like tires, and you know a certain area of the country is having a storm. That could be a really good opportunity to send out something that's targeted by geography, which is potentially something the customer gave to you or you're pulling off from mobile data to use for more personalization.
Man, so it sounds like you can get pretty detailed with these email flows. Is there a point of diminishing returns?
Yeah, I think it's that's a good question. So I would say if you're a small brand, your list is smaller. The best place to start is just building out all of the basics. So you'd want your welcome series, your browse abandonment, your post purchase, your re-engagement. And then once you have like maybe the flow that goes for everybody, then it's looking at your data to see what's maybe the highest value flow, and then thinking through what's the split. And you can always make counts of how many people, if you were, so for example, if you were thinking through segmenting on abandoned cart or browse abandonment, you could look through what are the products that have maybe the highest abandon rate or the most site visitors, and that can be good starting points. So I guess I would say like build the, if you're small and really prioritizing resources, build like the one set fits all, and then start looking at your data to prioritize what's next in terms of segmentation. It doesn't have to all be done at once, but the like almost the sky's the limit in terms of what can you do, but it's always like taking steps of rolling into more and more personalization.
Got it. So start with a solid foundation of like core flows such as a welcome flow, and then building in that personalization layers over
Yeah.
time. And as far as like, building in that data, and this is, I'm not an email expert at it. We're Amazon will never give us customer emails anymore. They killed that a long time ago because people just kept pulling them off and emailing them or calling them and all that stuff. Amazon hides everything now. But Oh shoot, I got off topic. I was thinking about Amazon. How are you pulling in a lot of that data? So is this like Google Analytics telling you sort of like, hey, Josh Raw was shopping on your website for a camera and he looked at all these lenses, shoot him an email, you know, that has a little guide on lens picking and our top 3 sellers or something.
Yeah, so because we work with a lot of e-commerce brands, a lot of our clients use the platform Klaviyo, and Klaviyo embeds some code on your website, so that it's sharing information of your site behavior. So once Klaviyo knows who the customer is by email address, it's tracking all of your on-site behavior. So that's a common one. And then any of the mobile data, if you're signed into it, that's also shared. As a brand gets bigger, there's also opportunity to so that's all called like first party data, like data that you as the brand have. There is opportunity to use what's called third party data if your list is big enough. So you can take your list and run it through a data provider and overlay different attributes. So that could be like their primary language spoken is English or Spanish or what have you. And then you could take that flag from what a third party data provider gave you to use that for another layer of segmentation or personalization. So you have two options. One is your first party, what you as the brand has for data, and the other option is third party data, which is what you're overlaying to your list of additional attributes.
Gotcha. So you combo that, right? You bring in your first party and then you can go out and pay for some third party enrichment and essentially utilizing that and then or getting all that and then leveraging it into those personalization flows.
Yeah, and I guess the other one I didn't touch on, which um, it's called zero party data. So sometimes in the email program, once you subscribe, brands will send you like a survey and ask you to tell them a little bit more. So it might be like, what's your gender? Where are you located? What do you care most about? And anything that's the customer or the email subscriber specifically told you, that's considered zero party data that they gave it to you to use for marketing purposes. Where first party is like the business has it because you are browsing on their site and the consumer agreed to it, but it's not as explicitly given.
Okay, interesting. So there's all these sort of ways, right, to gather data on the customer. I always think it's funny, by the way, demographic data. Amazon gives us that. And I'm always like, well, I don't necessarily know what to do with this because you can't market on demographics in Amazon right now. Maybe they'll change that in the future, but I don't know. You tell me. So on that demographic data, how often are you saying all males get this email flow and all females get this email flow? Because it actually works differently between the two sexes.
I think it would depend on what the brand is. I'd say there's some use cases where segmenting by gender can make a lot of sense. Like a clothing brand comes to mind of you have your men's apparel and your women's apparel. But if you're selling more like sporting goods, gender may not be the best flag to use for segmentation on your campaigns.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's smart. And see, this is why you're the ecom expert. I was is always like, whatever, who cares if it's a guy or a girl, right? Well, they care if they're shopping for clothing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting stuff. So diving even deeper, as we talk about, we're going into Q4 here. How do you balance sort of those promotional sends like, hey, Q4 or, Q4 customers aren't going to use that language, but hey, it's Halloween, it's Christmas, it's Thanksgiving, it's gifting time. Here's a sale versus the other sort of typical flows. Like I imagine you don't want customers to be getting like 50 emails about just 50 emails for the standard flow of like, hey, let's tell you more about camera lenses. You want them to start dropping off and getting more of those sales emails where it's like, hey, that lens that you looked at yesterday is on sale, for Black Friday for 50% off. How do you balance that and make those adjustments?
Yeah, so we plan our communication calendars at least 3 months in advance. So when we're in that planning stage and when you're talking about specifically campaign sends, so that would be like a product launch, a promotion, maybe just some general information of like reviews people had or using it on certain adventures, any type of like brand building content. So some of it comes back to the brand, like what's their goals, how promotional are they? So that's just asking questions to the brand, like when do you want to send promotions? how much do you want to do that? So that's kept in mind. And then the other part is having a variety of different campaign types of content sprinkled through that calendar. So by mapping it out, I'd say at a quarter of the time, one business quarter at a time, it gives us time to gather the content that we're needed for the campaigns if it's not already created. If we need some of that seasonal assets, it's time to put in requests for photography and videography or whatever's needed to build whatever that idea is to come to life. And then making sure, because you're looking at it like in a long period of time, you know how many promotions there are going to be, and like it kind of comes back to the brand and what the revenue goals are. Is it too promotional or not?
So it sounds like you're staying, obviously have to stay within the brand aesthetics. Like, Go Yard is not sending out coupon codes for their bags, or to use another common luxury brand, Louis V, right? They're like, are we a brand that discounts? And if so, how do we prep for it by creating actual creatives that are relevant for that time period? We're sending Halloween for Halloween, etc. Getting the creatives in line, building out the email, actually writing the copy and building out the flow, and then setting it in place while dialing back the other, value content or
Yeah.
brand content.
You mentioned holiday. So there's some actually pretty cool stuff you can do in the email channel in holiday. You can kind of rethink your header and footer, which would be the top and the bottom part of the email, to have that holiday flair. So like it could just be like at the top, like sprinkling lights or whatever kind of is that festive feel. And at the bottom, what we've seen, where like maybe traditionally it would just, if you were a clothing brand, for example, it might say like shop men's, shops women's, shop sweaters, shop pants, whatnot. You can switch it to like gifts for her, gifts for him, gifts under $50, just so it is more in that spirit of the holiday. That's just a little thing that you can do with the content as you're like going into this Q4 and like holiday sales period.
That's really cool. Yeah, and you know what that makes me think of is Starbucks and their pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah, that would be another example of like how do you bring that like period of that season to life in your communications.
So speaking of Starbucks and PSL, like you said, bring that period of life to the email comms. Easy to learn by kind of seeing what other people are doing and tweaking it. How do you sort of stay on top of, or where do you figure out, or like where do you find inspiration for email creatives and email ideas?
Oh man. So a lot of places. So one thing we as a company do, we have an email alias that everyone in the company has access to. So we sign up for whenever we have a client, we sign up for all of their competitors' emails, all of the brands that they find aspirational. And then there's brands that we ourselves just like and follow. So that email alias gets hundreds or maybe even thousands of emails a day, just so that we can look through it. And whenever we're campaign planning or looking where we had last year, it's a really good repository of just content that we can look at. And then additionally, there's a ton of other sources. I would say if you're just looking for email campaign examples, Really Good Emails is a really good site that you can look at, and you can search if do you want by campaign or do you want by an email communication series, and then you can sort by brands as well. Mild is another one that's really good. So I'd say it's just a combination of staying on top of it by subscribing to tons of emails, as well as going to some of the sites that have that content.
Milled, MILLED.com, and
Yes.
reallygoodemails.com.
Those are two sources that are great for creative inspiration.
You're not lying. I just pulled up Really Good Emails, and it's just like newsletter after newsletter with really beautiful photos. So I could see how you could come here and just like get loads of inspiration and ideas.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, Megan, you've given us a lot of value here. You've told us where we can go get inspiration, Really Good Emails, mill.com. You've given us sort of a perspective of the starter, building that foundation, and then dialing in your personalization. You've shown some mistakes that we can make. You've shown us how we need to like dial up our holiday creatives and content for those seasons. I think that there's a lot of good action items here. So thank you for coming on. How can people work with you or learn more about you or follow your journey?
So, like Josh said, I am Megan Bortner. I run labyrinth.digital. There's no.com. You can always visit our website and there's a contact us. We also have a presence on both LinkedIn and Instagram where you can follow the business's journey and some of the behind the scenes of what's going on. So, yeah, feel free, email me, check out any of our digital presence. All is good.
We'll do labyrinth digital, not .com,
Just
labyrinth
labyrinth.digital.
digital. Got it. Wanted to highlight that. Yeah, labyrinth.digital. Megan Bortner. Can follow her on all those socials and her company. So thanks again for coming on, Megan. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.